Welcome to another edition of Inspired Stories, where leaders share their experiences so we can learn from their successes, how they've overcome adversity, and explore current challenges they're facing.
Welcome to another edition of the Inspired Stories podcast, where leaders share their experiences so we can learn from their successes, how they've overcome adversity, and explore current challenges they're facing. Today's guest is Brian Bergford, founder of Bergford Performance Systems. He is a mental performance coach who develops customized performance systems for athletes, teams, coaches, business owners, and executives alike. We're also going to hear how he overcame a fear of the water to win national championships in swimming. And I'm also going to ask him why his friends call him the piercer. And we'll learn about a very specific type of breath work that he developed. So we've got lots of fun stuff to cover today. Before we get into the good stuff, today's episode is brought to you by my company, Add Back Benefits Agency, where we offer very specific and unique employee benefits that are both great for your team and fiscally optimized for your bottom line. One recent client was able to save over $900 per employee per year by implementing one of our proprietary programs. Another client is going to save over $1,200 per employee per year by implementing a patented construct that we offer. Results vary for each company, and some organizations may not be eligible. To find out if your company qualifies, contact us today at addbackbenefitsagency.com. Now, back to our guest today, mental performance coach, Brian Bergford. Brian, I appreciate you making the time to share your story today.
I am super stoked to do this, man. Like, let's get this going.
All right. I love that enthusiasm. Great energy from the beginning.
Yeah, let's start strong, man.
So, Brian, tell me, how did you first become interested in your field of mental performance coaching?
Um, well, I'll try and make this not too circuitous of an answer, but there's a little bit of background. So I think it was really came out of initially some interesting pieces of my childhood and just like weird emotional anyway, there were parts of it that were not great, let's put it that way, and that kind of drove me, like, from a pretty young age to start asking questions about why do people do the things they do? Why do they behave the way they do? Like, why do they think the way they do? And it just starts asking, like, why? And I knew that if I understood more about psychology and the mind, that maybe that would provide some answers. That's what led me into, like, interest in psychology. I eventually graduated with a degree in psychology. Interestingly enough, well, okay. So right before I graduated high school, if we back up a little bit, I had just got my personal training certification, and I went right after I graduated high school to like working in a gym. But at the same time, I was working at CU with the football team as an intern with the strength and conditioning program. And that's where I figured out really early on that the psychology of athletes and high performers and people that are just really, really elite level, top of their game, that's what I loved working with. I did not enjoy the general public whining like, "Oh, I'm so excited on Monday and I'm like not excited on Thursday," kind of BS. And I'm just like, I just didn't enjoy dragging limp noodles along. Like, it's really not fun. And I just knew that wasn't my space. But athletes absolutely loved it, their batteries included. And that's kind of how I knew that I was going to be working more in that type of a space, either that or like business leaders and people that are really, really high performance, high functioning already. But then getting in the psychology side, mental performance, and like the psychology that we have, our attitudes, our beliefs about things, it affects every single thing that we do. And people know typically a lot about like there's more talk about mental health right now. And like, are you a mental health advocate? I'm like, sure, I guess, but really I'm more of a mental fitness advocate. I'm like the front end. I'm not the repair, I'm more the prepare. And helping just like juice every last bit of performance for people that want to take things to the next level, which gets surprisingly more difficult the higher people go. It's just like if you take up a new sport, you make a ton of progress initially, right? Lots and lots of progress pretty quickly. But when you get to the top levels, in the Olympics, people will go and they'll train for another 4 years to maybe shave 100th of a second off of a time. And so, wow, it's almost like diminishing returns, but at that point there's such exceptional drive in the people that they're willing to just go to those lengths, and that's the spirit that I love, whether it's athletes, business owners, executives. I just want people kicking butt, taking names, and want to take things to the next level, but also really enjoy and appreciate life and have an amazing life, not just turn into a performance machine, because you can do that, but then people are like, but I'm dying inside. And that's not a great place to be. So that's the other part of it, is making sure that we balance it out, which is really challenging because for elite level performers, by definition, a lot of times they have to be out of balance. So it's tricky.
So I want to go back to, we don't have to, dig super deep into the childhood thing, but I'm kind of curious to understand the bridge from childhood not being great to, like, it must have been some kind of motivation to, okay, I got to figure a way out of this lousy situation. I've got to fix how I'm sort of approaching it inside, my own gray matter here.
Yeah, because yeah, I mean, I basically spent a decent portion of my childhood, like, fairly suicidal, and at some point, there's a decision that's made. You either, like, cave totally to desperation to a point where there's no return, but I knew that that was gonna be, like, the end of me, literally, and then the other option was to flip a switch and have some hope in the future in making yourself, fortifying your mind and becoming more and understanding more and making decisions and distinctions and things that could lead you beyond the knowledge and the wherewithal that and what you grew up with. Basically, I had to become somebody totally different, and so that really drove me, because once I made the decision, like, nope, I'm going to use this as fuel to move forward, whether it's anger, whether it's whatever. Initially it wasn't like pure motives, it was just like, I'm depressed, but then I became angry, which is a huge upgrade from being sad and depressed and, like, suicidal. And then that kind of led into other pieces of consciousness where I just kept elevating, and that's where it kind of led me, right? Seeing the magic that could happen by making fundamental shifts in mindset. And sometimes that sounds like a big deal, but it's not necessarily a big deal. A fundamental shift in a mindset a lot of times is like one tiny little tweak that sounds insignificant or almost indistinguishable when you say it in a sentence. But there's fundamentally different outcomes in life from very, very minute changes in people's beliefs and how they perceive things and how they choose to look at them.
That is amazing. Were you doing this, sort of flipping these switches on your own? Did you have somebody who was helping you, some sort of a guide or a mentor that was kind of showing you, hey, these things are possible?
I mean, the only thing that I could say that was a common thread throughout is, you know, God, the universe, like, whatever title name people want to put to it. But there's just like these little, like, there can be so much darkness, but then there's just these little specks of light along the way that can just help lead you in a slight direction, just make tiny little changes. And so there's people along the way. I don't want to say, like, no, that people didn't affect me, but the only thing that I can say is really consistent through that is like a guiding sort of force or a guiding hand that somehow helped me navigate, but not against my own will, right? Because, like, that's part of it. You have to participate in your own rescue. And apparently I was willing to do that. And I guess that's the only thing, if I am going to take credit for anything, I guess at least some level of willingness. And I only say that not for, like, I'm special. It's more, hopefully that might hit home with somebody right now that's in a place where, like, they may not be particularly willing, and just asking themselves a question like, how willing am I really? Because I've always said that to clients, you cannot teach willingness. Like, the person really has to decide, like, that is on them. And if you force somebody to do something that's really not in their will, like, it kind of falls flat, and you're robbing them of the opportunity to make the decision for themselves and to be strong, and basically, like, helping them continue to be a victim in something. And at some point, people just have to step the frick up and, like, move right along. And some people won't do that. I was with one of my clients that's an athlete recently, and, like, you got to fix stuff, man. Like, I did not have a nice way to say it. I was just like, I got to level with you. Like, the one thing you can count on from me is I will be honest and I will be straightforward and I will love you and I care about you. Please hear where this is coming from. But I was like, dude, like these pieces have to get lined out and you have got to make some different decisions for yourself. I'm not going to do it for you. Like, make the choice yes or no, because it's totally going to affect the rest of your career.
So this is pretty powerful stuff, Brian. Yeah, for somebody else who might be listening to this and is in one of those dark places that you've described, what is one thing that you can encourage them to do, to try, to ask themselves, to take a step? What piece of advice can you give them, having been somebody who was there and was able to make a big difference, a big change?
That's a super good question, and I want to preface whatever my answer is going to be that I haven't formulated yet, because I don't know. We'll see what comes out, but I want to preface whatever it is by saying that I want to be really really clear. Like, whenever I'm in a space of giving general feedback, please keep in mind it is very general. So, like, get some targeted feedback for you in your life, where you're at right now, what specifically you're experiencing, and all the everybody's individual makeup is so much different in how they process information and perceive things, and what they're motivated to, like, avoid in their lives, or what they're motivated to achieve in their lives, right? So this constellation that everybody has is so much different in their makeup, that it's really important that people don't get stuck in only because initially it's like, just latch on to hope wherever you can get it, right? So if that's through a podcast, if that's through a book, if that's through a speaker, if that's through like a role model, like whatever it is, it doesn't matter. Sometimes you just have to grab onto something. Wherever there's a foot or a handhold, like, move. Take encouragement, like, encourage yourself, like, listen to something, take stock of what you're putting in your head. Think about, like, what are the media sources that I have right now, and like, if like, I'm just going to swap one of them out. You don't need to make big changes, right? Everybody wants to make a big change, mostly because people are impatient and they want things to happen all at once, and they don't. It's tiny little changes, but just compounded, like, one after the next, and it's put one foot in front of the other instead of trying to hit a grand slam home run. Just, like, frickin' do something. Whatever's in front of you, move toward it. Like, trust yourself a little bit, listen to your intuition, and at a certain point, please connect with somebody that can contextualize the information for your situation. Because I'm always, like, in a way, hesitant to give information, because sometimes if it's really specific, people be like, oh, that sounds great to me, like, that totally makes sense, and they'll run with it. But if I talk to them one on one, I'm like, no, 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 don't do that, right? If we get really specific about giving general information, if that even makes sense, I think it can be really tricky, because people need to appreciate that it's worth getting in the hip pocket of somebody who knows how to put things together and work with you to build a program for you based on everything you are and want to become.
That makes sense. I understand. I can appreciate that. Brian, can we talk about any of your current clients on air? I know you told me about a really big one off air recently, but I don't know if it's okay to mention and give voice to, because it's pretty cool.
We can leave names out, and here's where we should talk in generalities, probably. And the
Okay.
only reason I say that is because like, I'm probably overly hesitant about speaking about this stuff in public, but I basically have to have somebody hand me a flashing neon light as a client, that they're like, please talk about this in front of other people, which, doesn't really happen a whole lot in the space of the client. So I'm happy to talk about anything in a general sense, and we'll just leave specifics out.
That's fair. Who is your ideal client? Why would somebody hire you? I love the two comments you made. How did you put it? I don't work with noodles,
Limp
and I
noodles, yeah.
limp noodles, and
It's
I,
hard to,
I
like,
love
push them.
batteries
It's hard to push
included.
them.
Yeah.
Yeah, and, like, and batteries included, right? Like, you get a package at home and batteries aren't included, and you wanna get things started, and, like, great, I'm dead in the water here. Um, it sorta, like, goes back to that thing when I was training clients in a gym, right? Like, general public, versus then I was at, like, a university level, like, working with football team. Like, that's very, very, very different audience. And so I think, mm, the primary thing is, it has to be somebody who's high performing already. And sometimes people are like, I don't know if I'm high performing enough. And I'm like, probably not then.
Mm.
you have to have a good enough self-image to be like, yeah, I'm high performing. They might be crap in the bed at the moment and like not feel very good about where things are at and kind of dejected or whatever. But at the same time, you have to know in your heart of heart that there's something much bigger than what you're experiencing right now. And like having the heart of a champion, again, like that's something too, you can't give that to somebody else. They have to decide for themselves. And so that's part of why I put that out there. I'm like, if you're a high performing person that has batteries included, meaning you're already like moving, you have momentum, and like all we have to do is like maybe tweak the trajectory or refine some things in terms of your approach so that we can be more effective. But that's very different than somebody who can't get off dead center ever and just always seems to be like, I'm just so, and you have to have made a decision for yourself, because like you got to bet on yourself before you ask other people to bet on you. And that's kind of who I'm looking for. So like, it's not just athletes, it's not just like business owners. Like I work with artists, I work with like, I don't really care, like really, really terrific, like amazing, great parents. Who's more high performing than that? Somebody staying home, like taking care of kids, especially like the daily, like day after day after day, and then trying to keep some semblance of order in yourself and health and self-care, excuse me, while raising the next generation. That's an exceptionally high performing position, right? So it's really not, I'm an athlete and I'm a business owner. So like those two categories make sense for me. But at the end of the day, we're all human beings. And the ones that kind of put themselves in that category of like, heck yeah, heck yeah, I have ambition. Heck yeah, I have the ability to produce. They may or may not be in the best spot at the moment. Heck, they could be like in the bottom of the barrel, but you have the heart of a warrior. Yeah, like let's link arms and let's rock and roll. If you don't, sorry, like find somebody else. I know that sounds really horrible, but I found out a long time ago that I didn't serve people. I, I serve the people best that I naturally serve and vibe with the best. And that's why I say that, because I don't want people, you know, and I always tell people that when we have conversations, if um like I've got a phone call after we get off of this with somebody and like I'm just gonna kind of feel things out and see where I can help the person. And I may have nothing to do with it. I have some people in mind already that I may send him to based on like what he wants to do that are maybe more specialized in those areas. And I'm fine with telling people that too, no, like you need to go talk to like this person or this person over here.
You're not a coddler, somebody who needs sort of a warm blanket wrapped around them. You're more of a kind of smack them in the face and give them the hard, honest truth.
Yeah, and but it's interesting because in a very loving way, because if they actually pick up on on my spirit and the way that I actually relate to people, I really, 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 really love people, and I a lot of times go out of my way to try and think of like the words to express something to somebody, especially specifically that I'm sitting with, in a way that they can receive that's going to be supportive. I really do go to great lengths for that, but I just cannot BS. Like I just can't. That bothers me. It's like it's like a violation of truth, and that is not something that I am interested in whatsoever. So yeah, if you're thinking of it like, if there's a hmm, like in the let's say the spiritual world or something, you have people that are like saints and like really just wonderful, loving ministers and things like that, and then you have a Zen monk, and I'm probably more like that. Like I'll hit you with a little stick one needed. Concentrate.
That's great. So, how is your role? Let's think specifically about your performance coaching as it pertains to athletes. How would your
Mhm.
role compare to, say, like a sports psychologist or sports psychiatrist?
Um, Mine is very, very focused on like performance-based, hyper practical and pragmatic from a performance standpoint, right? So like very, very much in the trenches on the ground. How do we take all these higher level principles and translate them to the environment that's in front of us right now? Um, if you have like clinical psychologists and sports psychologists, certainly not all the time. So this is like broadly speaking. Generally, that's more of an academic cadence. And certainly like on the clinical side, right? That's more, hey, something's going on. If you think of a clinical psychologist, they tend to be more like the equivalent of the doctor on the physical side, right? Like you need to go to them if like something's really going wrong. Like you got to get that stuff checked out and looked at by somebody who has a lot of specialization, a ton of education, like really, really brilliant. Same thing with a lot of sports psychologists, right? Like they're kind of in the middle a lot of times, but a little bit more academic. And then mental performance coaching, at least, what I'm looking at is very much what actually works on the ground in the battle right now.
So say you're working with a golfer, are you working with them on their swing? Like, is it like to that granular level, or is it like,
Yeah, yeah. Well,
yeah?
it wouldn't be swing mechanics, but it would be the setup, right? Like the pre-shot, the during shot, post-shot routines, and how to think about it and how to set things up. And like there's a lot of different pieces to that sequence because when you watch something like golf on TV, and actually golf is interesting because you can see some of their process, right? Somebody will get up to step up to hit the ball, they'll like waggle a little bit, and they typically have a little bit of a routine that you can see. But what you can't see is like the mental process they're going through is going down their checklist, sort of like a pre-flight checklist of like this, okay, great, that's on, this is on, check this, check this, check this. Awesome. Two of these and like ready to clear the mind, clear the mechanism, presence, and like go and just take the swing. There's a lot of moving parts beneath something that looks fairly straightforward if we're watching it on TV, which, by the way, I didn't really finish my analogy a moment ago. Sometimes I rabbit trail and sidetrack, but which I'm going to do now again, just for good measure. But, if you think of like a clinical psychologist is on like the doctor side, I'm more on the athletic trainer, like strength training side, strength and conditioning. Right. So like they're both under the guise of like in that case, in that analogy, like the physical side of things. And if you take that on the psychological, right, like I'm not on the doctor side, I'm more on like the training, strength and conditioning for the mind, getting your mind right, mind gym, that type of stuff.
As you were talking about watching athletes on TV and how they're going through sort of like their pre-shot prep, I'm thinking about, I watch baseball players, I watch golfers, they do this, they kind of have all these things. And in my mind, I'm thinking, well, that's some sort of a superstition. Like they got used to
Yeah,
touching this and then
yeah.
that. And what percentage of that do you think is superstition versus this just helps them sort of get their mind and body in check to do what they need to do next?
Apologies to all my baseball fans and players out there, but like there's a lot of superstition in baseball, so it's hard to tell a lot of times. And honestly, mental training, it's not heralded at the same level. Then this is going to change over the next, number of years, but it's really kind of like the last frontier in my mind, especially in sport, because we have so much specialization and so much support staff, excuse me, around athletes in particular. But this is the one area that it's like not really built out very well. And so a lot of the stuff that you actually see is just things that are kind of superstitions of like, and I always do this, and I like always wear these socks, even if they're dirty and it's on the road, I don't care because these are my home run socks. And it has nothing whatsoever to do, that has nothing to do with mental performance other than if somebody truly, truly believes that that works, placebos are really powerful. So who cares? Like in that sense, it's probably worth it, right? Well, placebo effects, like 30% of people will get the effect of the drug just when they 30% of the people with the placebo that will get it. So more power to them. Like if your lucky socks get it for you. But I'm getting into the really, really specifics and nitty gritty, especially in like something like baseball. Pitchers have to have like really, really, if they're going to be great and consistent, really, really tight mental routines. And some of them do it naturally. There's always people in business and sport that just do things with they were just like born to do it. And it's very subconscious for them. And it always has been because it kind of came easily to them. So it's not that they don't have a mental process. It's just so unconscious for them that if you ask them what they're doing, they're like, I have no idea. And a lot of times those are like the greats of history, right? They're so good that they have no idea what it is that they're actually doing. For the rest of humanity, we have to really show up and work and apply ourselves at the stuff to actually get it done.
Let's talk about how you overcame this fear of water to become a national champion in swimming. I mean, that's wild. I have a pretty intense fear of heights myself,
Mhm.
so I feel like that would be like me becoming a trapeze artist in a circus or a skydiving instructor, which just are unfathomable to me. So walk me through this.
Now I have some great ideas of what we should do next. Trapeze artists, like that would be fantastic. No, so like how did that come about? Is that what you want to
Yeah.
know?
Yeah. Well,
I don't
first, tell me about the fear.
Yeah, yes.
I want to understand the fear, and then I want to understand how you got from here to here.
Uh-huh. Good question. I don't I have my suspicions about where the fear like slash phobia actually originated from, but I'm going to leave that aside for now. Let's just put it this way, definitely from as early on as I can remember in my life, it was always there. So, and it was a phobia of having my head underwater. So like I had fears before, like I'd had stuff specifically that was less intense in terms of fear. And one of those was a fear of heights. Like it was intense, but it was still a fear. So it was something that I was like, okay, let's try. And this is what I did. Frankly, I was like, let's try rock climbing. But I wasn't terrified of heights. It was just made me really, really, really uncomfortable. Um, the water thing, having my head underwater, was a phobic response, meaning there's no rational thought anymore. It's complete panic. Like your brain goes into like true, just like run and hide and survival mode, and you can't think straight. And it's a total freak out. Like there's no pumping the brakes on it and slowing it down and like calm down, like just breathe. It is like that doesn't work. So I would not necessarily advise if people are at that place where they have a phobia, like don't mess with that on your own. Like you really, really, really need to work with a professional. I kind of dodged a bullet on that. And thankfully, like I did have enough background in like psychology and that type of thing that I was able to, I think, work through things that I would not recommend that other people do, unless they maybe have a lot of extensive experience in that as well, because it's tricky. When you mess with phobias, like if you mess up the treatment, you can make things 1,000 times worse. It's just way more delicate than dealing with a fear, because a fear there's still a part of the mind that can be rational and thoughtful. Phobias, you're gone, right? And so if you mess up like on the treatment side, it can make your life more of a living hell. So that's my disclaimer. So that's where it kind of began. And then I was like 30 and I decided, because I recognized, excuse me, this was still in my life, but it was really incompatible with how I saw myself, which is another thing back to your earlier question. What's one thing you could tell people about, if they're in that dark place? At some point, you have to decide who you are. At some point, you have to decide who you are.
So this was you flipping another switch.
Yep.
Kind of like you did back when you were 14.
Right. Yeah, I was like, this is not compatible in any way, shape, or form with who I am and what I'm about. And like, what the hell am I doing right now? This is not walking in integrity in my life. And so I decided, okay, I have a phobia of water. What's the next logical step? I know I'm going to take up swimming because it's a sport where your head is constantly underwater. That sounds safe. I didn't say I was the smartest human being in the world. That's for sure. But, it was like, it was gutsy, and I decided to take it up, and I found a swim coach. And ironically, a few years before that, the seed had been planted watching Phelps at the 2008 Beijing Olympics, like pull off what he did. And it was just a little seed in my mind. Like I didn't recognize it at the time, but looking back, like, which is another lesson, like life only makes sense in reverse, but you have to live it forward. So sometimes when people understand truths like that, it also helps them like just freaking relax. Like you don't have to understand everything. You're not going to. Certain things aren't going to make sense until you're 30 years older than you are right now, and that'll make perfect sense. But right now, like stop crying about things not making sense and just take the next best step. So there's that. But I went and found a swim coach. His name was Bob Bowman, which was the name of Michael Phelps's coach. Things make sense in reverse, right? Like that's really, really weird. It's not the same Bob Bowman, but it's just like, what are the freaking odds? And the first day I went out to the pool to like meet him, I was all just wigged out, and hey, and there was a swim coach like coaching a group, and I walked over and I was like, hey, are you Bob Bowman? And he's like, no. And I was like, do you know Bob Bowman? And he's like, that's Michael Phelps's coach. And he just looked at me like, you're an idiot. And I was like, dude, I know it's freaking Michael Phelps's coach. This is a different, never mind. So anyway, I found Bob, and he just, over a course of like a very short period of time, like we work together. I'm good at applying myself and actually just doing what needs to be done and like going above and beyond like what a coach would give me. And so he taught me the 4 competitive swim strokes. And then a couple months later, I was at a lesson with him and he goes, "You could join the master's program. Like you're actually at a point where you could do that." And that terrified the out of me. And so I decided, okay, while I'm still slightly enthusiastic about what he said to me, even though it's terrifying, I'm going to go sign up tomorrow. So I signed up for a master's swim team. Like the next day, I started rocking and rolling. Then that leads to like a little bit more. And I'm still terrified in the water at this point and was working through that stuff for years. But I remember not too long into it, I got this thing of like, what if I could compete one day? Because I dropped in at a high school swim meet because the aquatic center that I swim at to this day is like 3 minutes drive from my house. I dropped into this high school swim meet and it was really inspiring because I always loved athletes and like being in that environment. I just get choked up in those places, just watching people and the competitive excellence and the collective energy that's in a place like that. It's so much different than like, I don't know, a bar. Right? Radically different energetic components to it. And I saw them competing. I was like, maybe I could compete someday. And then that led to eventually I did compete. And then one day I got the crazy idea that I didn't tell anybody at the time, like maybe I could qualify to like swim at nationals one day. What if I could just somehow get good enough to qualify to go to nationals? Like that would be super amazing. Because the whole time I'm thinking like, what if it inspires somebody, right, that's hesitant or like dealing with their own stuff? Because I had the benefit of seeing people that inspired me through my life, and that's what I needed to maybe take like the one more step that was a small, seemingly insignificant step, but became very significant because of where it led. And so this is a lot of the driving motivation the entire time. And eventually, like, I qualified for nationals. It was just under 5 years after I started swimming, I think. I was at my first national championship and just kept going. And then in 2021, like won a couple of events at nationals, and that was super exciting. And I'm still rocking and rolling, man.
That's incredible. What are your top events?
Good question. I'm still figuring that out. So
Okay.
pretty much any strokes, and like not freestyle, but like backstroke, breaststroke, butterfly. Really enjoy those. Probably at this point, maybe I enjoy backstroke the most, but it's close because I really love breaststroke, and fly is like right beneath that. And I enjoy the variety and challenging myself being very versatile in what I do. So typically masters practices, there's a lot of freestyle, especially if it's a triathlete focused workout. It's basically the entire thing is just freestyle, right? And I don't really care for freestyle that much. Like I can swim it and it's on the back half of like my IM. So usually I'm swimming like 200, 400 in the backstroke, breaststroke, and like the 200 individual medley and the 400 IM, right? And those are the ones where you swim all 4 competitive strokes. Um, and that's how I practice too. I basically am pretty even across my training for all 4 of the strokes.
So I want to go back to that first day of getting in the pool with the guy who has the same name as Michael Phelps's coach.
Yeah, yeah.
Because I hear you sort of talk a little bit about the trajectory, like after that, like, he recommend, hey, you could get into a master's program. At this point, you are still scared to get in the water, but you're doing it and you're working through the fear. But I want to talk about what happened on that first day. You were
Uh-huh.
terrified to get in the water. How do you take that first step? What does that look like? That I'm here, now what? Like, help me overcome this.
I mean, at that point, I had done a little bit of work right before I started working with him just to make sure that I could kind of keep my wits about me, like in the pool, right? Because I didn't want to show up to a swim lesson like run off the pool deck crying head in hands like I did when I was a little kid, when my parents tried to do swim lessons and like that didn't work very well. So I'd kind of dip my toe in like probably like the week leading up to it and just making sure that I could kind of get in and be comfortable. But I also have this patch and it says, and it's great because it's just like this embroidered thing. And it says, I won't say the word, but it begins with F. So like F it. my final thought before making most decisions. And at some point, you just have to put yourself there, like, "F it, let's go, like, let's rock and roll." You have to push yourself for the edges. There's not always people there to tell you, like, "It's okay," and, like, if you need a pat on the back all the time, there's nothing wrong with pats on the back. I think we all love it, but if you need a pat on the back all the time, that really, really limits your potential of what you can do. Like, pat yourself on the back. Why don't you care as much about what you think about you as what other people think about you? Like, what's up with that? And, like, to this day, I'll come back to your question, I promise, but, like, on the pool, because this might be really helpful for people, like, on the pool deck, it is pervasive across the swimming population. Swimmers coming up and, like, standing on the side of the pool deck, or, like, having, their legs and just, like, over the side, but they're not in the water yet, and they always talk about how, like, this is the part I hate the most, especially if it's a competitive pool, because the water's cold. Like, it's not like a rec center pool. It's not comfortable sort of when you get in. It's very uncomfortable. And I just train myself from very early on, like, get up there, like, I don't hesitate, let's rock and roll. And I actually train myself to enjoy doing the thing that nobody else enjoys doing, because why the hell not? Other people hate this, like, I can love it. That's how I pick events to swim. I pick all the things that nobody else wants to do. I don't pick what I want to do. Really, I look at where am I going to be competitive and where do I line up, and that informs my decision. I'm like, oh, oof. Well, that's the one event I didn't want to have to swim at nationals, but, like, that's what I'm swimming, and that's kind of how I pick things. So that first day, I think that's really what it was, is that mindset of, you have to be able to, like, click into gear at a certain point, and you can't have decision constipation. You have to be able to, like, not just, no, like, just make the decision, right? Um, and it's a quality, and how do you develop that capability? One tiny freaking decision at a time. Just make the decision, like, do things that are uncomfortable, and every time you do it, you should be rewarding yourself and caring about it, not, "No, I'll wait till something really big happens." Listen, if you can't celebrate little victories, like, the big ones are gonna be hollow and empty, and you are going to crash afterward, right? Like, little things, that's how all the best stuff is built, little things. So, find something that you normally don't like doing, and the next time you're there and you know you're about to go into that moment of indecision or questioning yourself, "I don't know if I want to," like, throw yourself into the activity. Like, just see what it's like.
You
Throw
need a
yourself into it.
you need a laxative for that decision constipation that you
You
mentioned.
you do, man. You do. So give yourself that there laxative and see how it does.
Brian, I gotta know, why do your friends call you the piercer?
So that is now more people will know about it, but I have a handful of friends, like one in particular that, um the person who originated this, and then kind of word got out, and then, like, now it's really out because we're on this platform, which is great. Um, it originated from, it was a really good friend of mine, and he's a great guy, super brilliant, like, business owner, super high performing, awesome. Like, I look up to this guy in so many ways. He inspires me, he helps me look at things from a different perspective. He just has a different energy, a different way of thinking and approaching things. He's naturally super duper intuitive. I tend to be more in my head, which is great because I know how to deal with being too much in your head, which is basically what all high performers deal with, is the anxiety of getting stuck in your head and, like, just feeling like, oh my God, I can't even function. And knowing how to come out of that is really valuable. So there's a lesson in that too, right? Like, the things that you're not good at, when you become good at them, you become an incredible teacher because it didn't come naturally. And so you can go back and say, like, here's this step and here's this step, and you just know how to fine tune and fix things, and you can really help people in a different way, um, because you understand the process that goes into it. So anyway, this guy is just, like, naturally super intuitive, and but he would, we were talking once, and he needed coaching on something, like, just something he was struggling with. And um so I just, like, started coaching and going into things, and all of a sudden he's like, his eyes kind of get wide, and he was like, "Oh wow," or something. I was like, "What? Like, what just happened?" He's like, "That's exactly what it is. Like, I didn't even, that, like, never even occurred to me. Like, holy crap."
So when
And
it's like this ability to sort of, like, pierce
pinpoint.
the veil and,
Yep.
like, see what's sort of behind the facade?
Yeah, because there's so many things clamoring for our attention, especially when things aren't going right. It can be really convoluted and difficult to happen upon, like, what's actually happening here? And where is the leverage point where we're going to get the most benefit if we fix this one thing that it changes everything else about the complexion of our business, our life, our whatever. And I think that a lot of people spin cycles because they're really like kind of playing whack-a-mole and just trying to deal with like the surface level stuff, but you're playing whack-a-mole always, and it just keeps you busy, but you're constantly fixing surface level problems. And like, let's dive down beneath that and like, let's just figure out what the hell is going on. And after he started calling me like, dude, like my new nickname for you is the Piercer. And he told me that he's like, I now have your name in my phone as Brian the Piercer Bergford. And he like sent me a screenshot of it. And I was like, oh my goodness. So that's where that started. Um, but it helps me really understand there's things in coaching that I'm not particularly adept at, that there's coaches out there that are way, 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 way better. And I'm like, great. That's why I said, like, talk to that person. I just want you to get with somebody that's going to actually help support you get to where you need. But one of the things I'm really, really good at is getting to the heart of the matter. Plus, I'm kind of incapable of BS on the truth level. And so I just have to, like, I have to bring it forward if I see it. Um, but the thing is, it's that saying that the truth will set you free, but first it'll piss you off, or whatever the saying is. And it is, right? Like it's very disarming at first because you're like, oh my God. Oh wow. And it can be a little bit much on the front end, but then you're like, wait, hold on though. I didn't love how that felt initially, but now I can see a path out. This totally makes sense. I hadn't considered this. And like now that I know the truth, you can't, again, it goes back to just like biblical proverb, right? Don't build your freaking house on sand. Like, right? The waves are going to come up and it's going to wash it out to sea. You have to have a firm foundation, and you cannot build on top of lies. I mean, you can, and we see this in like, Congress every single day of our lives, right? Everything built on lies in a house of cards. But like in our lives, things we really, really care about, if we want functional lives, we've got to build, and if we want things to last, it's got to be on a foundation of truth. How many relationships, long-term relationships, do people really have that are completely built on lies? And if they do, it's this exercise in keeping everything together and maintaining and like facades and stuff like that year after year after year. And it's exhausting. At some point, it's like, wouldn't the truth just like be refreshing? Even if you don't like hearing it, like, wouldn't it be refreshing? And like that's what I want from people as well, especially coaches and mentors. I'm like, just give it to me straight. Like I I really, I can get sensitive and like hurt in a lot of ways, like pretty easy. I'm not one of those people just with like a crazy, insanely naturally thick skin where like nothing really bothers me. But what I value more than avoiding the pain of hearing the truth is the truth itself and what you can create coming out of it. And that goes back to our conversation at the beginning of like, some point you have to decide who you are and what you're really about. And you're going to have to make some really tough decisions about, okay, I'm willing to go to the place that I don't want to go and do the thing that I sense that I need to do, but that I least want to do, so I can actually know what the truth is, because I can't live like this anymore and I won't live like this anymore. And the sooner you decide to make that choice, the less misery you have to go through, right? Don't be like me in childhood. It took me a really, 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 really long time to get to that place where I made the decision to just, okay, like let's look at the truth and like, what do I really need to do? And like stepping up. It took me a long time. So it was like depths of despair for so long, for so many years without any hope. And there was still a lot of not despair after that, but like really, really difficult times afterward. But at least I started to know who I was and what I was made of. And like, if I can make it through this, some part of me knew I could make it through anything else that I ever faced in my life. And little things like that get you through. Little things get you through, And that's the other thing too for people. Like, please smile at somebody, encourage them. Like when you're not in the mood to talk to somebody at the gym, like take your stupid headphones out and say hi, or like fist bump somebody, or do something to uplift somebody. Because we just, and it's corny and cheesy and like the ripple effect of kindness and whatever, but it's really true. Sometimes people just need a smile. Sometimes they just need your presence. Sometimes they just need a glance. something, because they're right on the edge, they're right on the edge, they're right on the edge. And sometimes we just don't know how much we can tip the balance with something that is so inconsequential and seemingly meaningless to us. And it saves somebody else's life. And they may never tell you. And if you need people to tell you all the time, you're not going to make as much of an impact as if you're like, no, I just want to do whatever I can to contribute to the people around me, to be intentional. And I'm an introvert, like highly introverted. So it's not in my nature to, like, I love people. And when I get around people, like sports teams, and like we're working together, and like I was doing that yesterday, like pro sports team, and like getting everybody on the same page, and like a room of guys, like in the locker room, getting everybody on the same page, fired up, totally firing on all cylinders, and bring the, like, I love that stuff, but I refresh on my own, right? I have to replenish by retreating and being away from people. Like, that's just me. I don't recharge my batteries by being around a bunch of people. So anyway, as an introvert, mm, I don't know where I was going with that, but the point being, oh, it's hard for you sometimes to extend yourself. So go out beyond just your natural inklings and your comfort zone and the things that you're comfortable and competent at doing. Because again, if you're not uncomfortable, you're not, there's no, now being uncomfortable doesn't mean you're growing, but being comfortable for sure means you're not growing. And there's somebody, I don't know, it was a book I was reading or something recently, but she was talking about like every night and after school, like when she would go home, they'd sit at the dinner table and may, unless this was you, like, okay, now I'm getting freaked out. But whoever this was, it was like the, I thought it was the daughter, but maybe it was a son. Like the dad would go like, "What did you fail at today?" And would ask that every single night at dinner to her. And she just thought it was such a weird question, because he would do it to her and her sister, and like, come on, like, what did you fail at today? And that was always the question that came up at dinner. And like, why is that important? He's like, because if you're not failing, you're not growing, you're not pushing yourself, you're not going toward your potential. And that was just a really, really powerful thing, I thought.
Yeah, that is powerful. Thanks for sharing that, Brian. I've got one more question I want to ask you, but before I do, I want to make sure people know how to get in touch with you. Best place, I'm guessing, is your website, bergfordperformance.com, Bergford performance.com. We'll have it in the show notes. Is that best place for people?
Beautifully done, my friend. That is
All right.
it.
So last question I have for you is, I know you have an interest in particular types of breath work, and you've even developed a very specific type of breath work yourself. Can you give us a brief description of it and what the purpose or the benefit of it is?
Sure. And so I think breath work is great. It's not a panacea. It doesn't solve everything, right? Like there's always, when things become in vogue, there's always this rush, like, oh my gosh, like maybe this is the answer to all my problems, right? In society, and people are just like, ooh, and then like that thing dies out, and eventually like a new wave come behind it, and like everybody runs to that. And I think like, I try and remind myself to temper that a little bit, because like no matter how awesome something is, it's part of a greater whole. And like when you see it in context of like, this is one aspect of, or a technique or a methodology or a mode of becoming more complete or helping yourself as a human in terms of like self-development, fantastic. And breath work is one of those things. I think it gets a lot of attention, and it should. It's not the fix to everything, but it can be really tremendously helpful in terms of things like um, even simple stuff, lowering stress hormones, right? Like getting cortisol down, like, you know, testosterone up, things like, norepinephrine. Like we might want that stuff to go down a little bit, like the stress hormones that are so pervasive and that we live with, because just the pacing of our lives, oftentimes we just live in this state of just like we're just buzzing all the time, and it's really unhealthy. So I think that you can shift the hormonal balance in your body, your blood chemistry. You can completely shift with breathing exercises if you know what you're doing. So that's one of those things too. I'm like, get with somebody who understands and knows what they're doing. I think the specific exercise you're referring to is there's a course basically in my app. So I have an app, like the Bergford Performance Systems app. And if people go onto my website and they hop on the email list, it'll get them an invite, and they can go in, and there's a bunch of free courses. There's actually, I don't know why I put so much free courses and material in there because I'm always like, I should probably like charge for some of this because I do have like hidden, and the meditation one is not a free course, but there's a bunch of stuff in there. But the meditation one is like really in a super inexpensive for what it is, but it walks people through this breathing exercise and this this short meditation. The short one is like 14 minutes. There's also like a 30-minute version. But there's one point in there where there's like some really, really powerful breathing going on. Um, and after that, I kind of took elements of different styles of meditation and like yoga and breath work and kind of combine them in unique patterns and ways to just give people a different way to experience something like meditation that they typically think is really boring, and like just sit there and be calm. And was like, no baby, there's points in the meditation that are like that, but it's also really active. There's points where you have to get after it. And if you sort of halfway commit, it's just, it's not cool, man. It's like
I've
kissing your
tried it
sister.
before. It is a very active breath. It is not like a just feel the breath coming in and out of your nose. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, no, no, that's exactly it, right? Like you have to make a decision like to commit to it. And I think that it goes back to that thing. It's like a great exercise you do with yourself every day. You go and do I want to do this? No, I don't want to do it. That's exactly why I need to do it. Because the things that you want to do immediately that are like, oh, yeah, I want to do that, are typically not very good for you long term. And all the things that have a barrier to entry up front that you're like, I naturally don't want to do that, are probably really good for you. So that's just like a nice rule of thumb. But it's a really active breath. And there's a lot of different types of breath work too. But like that one has been really powerful, I think, for a lot of people that have enjoyed that and like used that like over a course of months and years. And you can go everything from just like relaxing yourself to some more advanced breath work, which I don't really go into in there, but like you can have really, really powerful, like psychedelic type experiences, but without any of the like, drugs. um, but that stuff can be like really, really powerful when you understand like how your body chemistry, when you understand how to shift it and how to change it. It's just such a great life skill, because then when you get on the playing field, right, and you're an athlete, like for me as a swimmer, and I get on the pool deck and you have all these different skills and you know how to shift like your psychology, like last moment, and like change your body and the state of mind that you're in, like at the drop of a hat. It makes everything else, and like owning a business and like working with and helping and supporting employees and dealing with customers, so much easier, because your benchmark, your set point, right, for like really getting after things and like what's difficult and having to shift, from over here to where like I'm really, really super frustrated and I want to throttle somebody, to like, I got to be spot on because I got one of the most important meetings of my life in 10 minutes and I better get this sorted out right now because that is going to have lasting consequences. It makes that stuff so much easier. So it's disciplining your body, disciplining your mind, and putting yourself in that position over and over. And a lot of, when you lose control of your breath, it's over. You don't have control anymore. So when you go back to breathing exercises, it brings you back to the present moment. It's taking control back, and that's really powerful. One last thing here. There's I don't know who the quote is from. Somebody could probably help us out with this, but it's, anxiety is excitement without the breath. Anxiety is excitement, but without the breath. So when anxiety, like you're not conscious of your breath, and if you are, you've lost control of it. When you're excited, so they're like this far apart, excitement and anxiety. And that's something like helping athletes and business owners and people that are doing presentations, executives, like this is the kind of stuff we're up against. Is I've got a really high stakes situation right now and I have to keep control of myself. You have to be in control of yourself before you can be in control of your performance. That's so huge. And a big part of that is like you have to be able to regulate and your breathing and your body and what it's doing and understand how to change those things, because otherwise it just feels like, god, I'm at the mercy of everything around me and I can't seem to get ahead, and like I do really well and then I like fall apart. And it's like you got to be in control of yourself before you can control what's in front of you.
That's awesome. Brian, thank you so much for your time today. It's been a great conversation.
I appreciate the invite. I've been excited about this. I actually wanted to do it earlier and then I just had a crazy week. So, um, I appreciate you hanging out and like being patient with me, like getting on here, but I didn't feel very patient because I was just chomping at the bit to get here. So I'm blessed to be here. I appreciate you. And like huge, just want like to your listeners, to your audience. Um, just a heartfelt appreciation and gratitude to you for being here, for listening, for being present, and that you care enough about yourself and the people around you to be constantly educating yourself, to maybe pick up one little tiny tidbit from, maybe this entire thing. Maybe it's just like one thing is going to shift for you a little bit, and you would put in this much time to get one little thing, and that's how champions are made. That's how champions are made. So thank you for being that.
I love it. That's a wrap on another episode of the Inspired Stories podcast. Thank you for listening with us today.